Good morning. My name is Chas Drader, and this is Ski Radio 92 FM.
Kia ora everyone. Special regards to Chas Drader's family, of course, and all those who will be gathered together today. Sad occasion, but going to be one of a lot of laughs and maybe a drink or two as we say cheers to Chas. And I've been asked to remember my recollections of Chas, and I can report that he chose a good year to come, 1985 to Queenstown. I was in the same class of 85, and Chas famously started a radio station called Ski FM that lasted just a month. It was quite hard to own an independent station in those days, but he needed a bit of help after that to Chas, and believe it or not, he worked alongside me as a journalist for about 6 months in Mountain Scene, and that was interesting. He did a lot of features, so and he turned out to be a very good writer. He wrote profiles of people like Trevor Gamble and Alan Brady, and famously one time we were up against the deadline, not for the first time, and we had just a tiny skirk of information that there could be some big development at Frankton, and we said that's enough, and we sort of painted this colourful picture that there would be a big shopping centre at Frankton. This is very futuristic, of course. We thought that there was no chance of that ever happening. Anywho, what happened was my manager at the day and a shareholder in Mountain Scene, a guy called Frank Marvin, took pity on Chas as another independent battler, and maybe over a few fags and a few rums, concocted the idea that we should heavily promote Chas's next radio venture, and he had another go at another radio station. Didn't go too well, but in the end he got together with Q92 FM eventually, which was a merger, and of course those were the halcyon days of radio. With real community radio, and of course the people that Chas brought along, people like even his future daughter-in-law Alexa Forbes, and a lot of other people, and it's lovely to have people like Andrew Patterson down. But before I wander on, I just want to say he was a legend in this area. Amazing, even ran a radio station in Glenorchy of all places, and probably had the most amazing voice. He had a face for radio, but an even better voice, an incredible voice for radio, and will always be remembered. Cheers to everyone.
My first memorable meeting of Chas was at what was then the Continental Restaurant, in the bottom of the mall, and he was interviewing me as the potential news reporter for a new radio station he was starting up, 92 FM. He was a bit worried about my lisp, my speech impediment, but he laughed about it and we got over that, and I got the job as the news reporter.
G'day everyone, I'm Grant Stewart, and I spent the best part of 11 years at Q92 FM, starting in 1993, just 1 year after its inception, where I met the wonderful Chas Drader. It all come about through a show that they were doing at the time called the Desert Island Show, and at the time I was a hydrocarbon transfer technician. I was working at the mobile fuel station in town, in Queenstown, and I got invited up on a Desert Island show, and with Dave Laurent, and it all started from there. I met Chas then, and of course 11 years later I walked out of Q92. What a place, what a man.
Well, I first officially met Chas in about the end of April or early May 1988. I was recently transferred down to Queenstown and was managing the Liquorland and Gorge Road, and Chas turned up one day, knocking on the door, looking for advertising, because he'd just arrived in town and was about to start Ski Radio for 1988. However, we did find out much later on that I'd met him briefly in the early 70s when I'd gone to the local radio station in Hastings to pick up a prize, and I was given a tour of the station, and Chas happened to be on air at the time. So probably, officially 88, but probably about 74, 75 was my first recollection of knowing about Chas.
Hi, my name's Nicole Duthie. I met Chas Drader for the very first time in 1997. I was part of a wine tasting team called Al's Angels, and we were sponsored by Queenstown Physio and coached by Greg Hay, and Chas interviewed me. We were really big news in 1997, and that's how I met Chas Drader for the very first time.
I met Chas, I believe, in the station building, in the old Q92 building there. What was happening? We were drinking. I was there simply because my very, very, very dear old friend Andrew Sholem, who I just don't hear from anymore, was selling advertising for Chas, which was a change for him from selling ice to the Eskimos.
Okay, first question. What year did you meet Chas? Where were you and what was happening at the time? I met Chas in 1996. Chas came over to Alexandra to interview me. He was basically stealing me from one radio station to his radio station. It was very cloak and dagger. Basically the interview consisted of us going to my flat in Alexandra, smoking a lot of cigarettes, laughing, and I got the job.
I met Chas at a council meeting in 1983. He must have just arrived in town because he was sitting at the reporter's desk, and I think he may have been a reporter for the Mountain Scene. What I remember was that he had the most unusual hairstyle. It was permed and tinted, I think, and all standing more or less on end. I thought this is going to be an interesting guy in the district.
I met Chas in 1985, working at 4ZA in Invercargill. He was there, and I can see him now with his long legs hanging over the desk, fagging. We all fagged like mad then. And we were having a big launch up here at the Ramada to launch the new radio station, Ski FM. And I moved to Queenstown, worked for Resort Radio, of course. And Chas was at 92 FM, and I listened to 92 FM. It was fabulous. And then I got into big trouble when I was on the Desert Island show. Anyway, then of course Chas got me over sales manager, and then that day it was FM went down and we were Q92, and it was the beginning of a fabulous, exciting, fun journey in radio. And we rocked that town, honestly, and Chas was he was the man at the helm. We had so much fun, fantastic, lots of drinking, lots of smoking, sold lots of advertising. It was fantastic.
So, g'day folks, I'm Andy Sholem. Where did I first meet Chas? It was 1996, would have been September 1996, and I just arrived in Queenstown and was looking for work, and I was curious about a job in radio. So I worked out that there were two stations in town, Resort Radio and Q92 FM, and I went and had an interview at Resort Radio, and then popped over and met Chas at Q92, and he offered me a job. The two stations, Q92 FM certainly looked like the most fun. I remember meeting Ferg and Alison Beaumont with him, and Chas just had this amazing voice and a fantastic sense of humour, and he asked some really sort of piercing questions, which impressed the heck out of me. And I thought, well, of the two, this certainly looks like the place to be. So that's how I met Chas.
I first got to know Chas in the late 1990s when Alexa, Fiona and I set up the Southern Lakes News Bureau, and we provided a news service to both Q92 and Resort Radio. When things fell over with Resort, we approached Chas and offered him an exclusive service. I well recall Alexa and I taking him to the Red Rock Bar about 9 o'clock in the morning, and after rums and cokes all round, we sealed the deal. Chas was delighted to have one over as a more conservative competitor, and after that, Q92 News attracted a very big following.
I first met Chas in January 1990. I'd been working in Christchurch at the time in banking, and I was bored out of my brain and really keen to get into radio. And I shared this with a guy called Mike Godinay, who was working at Radio Avon at the time. He was a sales manager there. And he said, why don't you ring my old mate Chas Drader? He's got a little station down in Queenstown, and he might give you a shot. So I rang Chas, and he said, well, I can't pay you anything over the summer, but come and work for a couple of weeks and I'll give you some accommodation. So I did. I showed up and had an amazing time. Got a whole lot of activities in Queenstown done and spent time behind the mic and was absolutely hooked. And the rest, as they say, is history.
I first met Chas in 1992. I was cocktail bartending at McNeil's that had just opened, and I was the representative for Snow Queen. Had to go and have a radio interview with Chas, and when he asked me why did I like paragliding so much, and I told him it was better than sex, he quietly behind the mic was making all these radical cut it signs, and was in a bit of a state, for in those days that just wasn't done.
I met Chas in Q92 FM in Queenstown in 1992. I was going to collect a prize from the radio station after one of their 92-hour birthdays.
So the first time I met Chas was actually 25 years ago. It was in 1995 when I was sweet 16, and I just started going out with a Q92 member of staff who was 8 years my senior. Outrageous. And he took me to the Q92 Christmas party, which is held on the Princess, which is a boat, and it was awesome. It was awesome. We got drunk. We got really drunk. I think I managed to keep it together, though, being like 16. But I do remember Chas as being very welcoming, very sweet, and then I started working for him, so it must have gone well.
Hi there, Nick Butcher. So I met Chas in about 1995, 1996, and I'd always known of Chas. I'd lived in Queenstown for some time. I was working for the opposition radio station, and I'd quit, basically, and I'd never felt that comfortable working in that sort of commercial sort of atmosphere. And he gave me a ring, and I'd never actually ever spoken to him, and this deep Chas Drader voice, and he said, I hear you quit. And I said, I did. And he said, want to come work for me? I said, wasn't there some sort of law, radio law, where you can't go and work for the opposition for X amount of days, months, whatever, they might sort of take legal action. And he said, do you really care? I said, no, not really. And he said, great, come in and see me. I said, all right then. And so I did, and I ended up working for Chas for about 2 years. And that's how it began.
Mr. Chas Drader, God, Chas, I'm trying to think of the first time I met you. You just seemed like we immersed ourselves in a Queenstown that Chas was such a huge part of, and he became such a huge part of our lives. And I say ours because my cousin Bex started the radio station back in about 95 when we first came to town, but I think it was when Charlotte started working there in sales that we actually met and got to know Chas. I remember many times down at the Red Rock when I'd come in with the rafting crew, because I worked for Danes and then Raging Thunder. The Q92 crew would be having their probably end of current deadline meeting and celebrating getting the deadline, and then of course launching straight into when they had to look at ways as of the next day for their next monthly deadline. And I also became part of that when I started working with the studio and also Q92 in sales, and that was in the 2000s. And it was epic. We would get to the end of a day, the last contract was signed, boom, would make deadline, to be a big congratulations and whoop whoops around the studio, and we'd go down for a beverage at the Red Rock, and of course we'd launch, Chas would launch straight into what we had to do to get the next month's budget, when all we wanted to do was actually just take a rest for a moment and celebrate that we actually made that one. Beautiful Chas.
Chas would say, selling hot air was one of the most difficult things to sell, full stop. So we had to sell ideas, we had to dream up promotions and sell creative concepts. And that's why I loved working with Chas at Q92. It was so creative.
We were setting up the radio station. Brownie, me, Chas and Steph, we used to get together almost every evening. Wasn't so much about giving each other advice. We were planning a radio station and seeing how we could go with it on a shoestring budget. One night after one of these planning sessions, we were watching the movie Heathers, God knows why, not the greatest movie in the world, but there was one particular line that changed the way we focused ourselves in the thing. It was Christian Slater who had the line, "The extreme always seems to make an impression." Now this just tickled Chas's fancy, and he chose that as our motto for the way we set up and operated Q92 from that moment on forward.
A couple of really good pieces of advice from Chas. The first one was when I'd done a follow-up story on a story that Jenny over at Resort Radio had got the scoop on, and I was doing a follow-up, and Chas ripped it up and said, "News is the plural of new. If it ain't new, it ain't news." The second piece of advice that he gave me that was awesome was that the rules are for people who don't know what they're doing. As soon as you know what you're doing, you can break the rules.
The best advice Chas ever gave me was two things. It was, in some cases, turn the microphone on. And in other cases, turn the fucking microphone off.
I remember many years ago when I started working for Chas, a week after I quit working at Resort Radio, and I said, what will people think, it's kind of disloyal or whatever. And he said, "Butch, do you really give a fuck?" The man had a way with words.
The best advice Chas ever gave me was, I'm going to try and do Chas's voice here. "Elisa, radio is not just a bunch of songs and some commercials, it's theatre of the mind."
Chas gave me two pieces of advice, really, that I can remember. One was about creativity, just, the theatre of the mind thing. Radio is unique in that respect, and get into that. I remember on one occasion having a lot of trouble trying to fit a concept into 30 seconds, which was the slot that the customers are paying for. And Chas had come into the production studio to have a cheeky fag, and I was sort of explaining the problems I was having, and he said, "Look, it doesn't matter." Chas never spoke like that. It's very hard to imitate Chas. If it takes 60 seconds, it takes 60 seconds, just as long as it's good radio. And I've always believed in that. Make it good radio. The other piece of advice he gave me was sort of more about one's on-air persona. And he said, just be as natural as possible. Just speak to people on air as you would to them face to face, as if they were your friends.
And advice that Chas gave me? Nah, I think I gave him more advice than he gave me. I miss my old buddy. We had so much fun. Lots of things I could never tell you. Chas and Steph and Carl and I.
The best advice that Chas ever gave me was just back yourself, be yourself. And, he backed us. He had a massive job with all the creative people and minds that we had at Q92 FM. And arguably, without a doubt, I think to this day, the concentration of creative people that we had there you'd be pretty hard pressed to find that anywhere. Radio just isn't what it was back then, and a lot of that's to do with Chas's approach to management. He just let us go. He gave us enough rope, and I occasionally did hang myself, and then he took it off my neck and let me come back again.
I remember you saying to me once, "Rules are made for most people to follow, and for those smart enough to know how to break them." Wise words, and I know you certainly lived up to your own advice.
Piece of advice Chas gave me. Well, on this occasion, because there was a few, I'd asked him if he'd do a ear check with me. So that involved going around to Red Rock. He'd have his rum and coke, and I'd have my bacon and eggs. And he said, I've been listening to you. I was working at the time at Q92 doing Sunday mornings, the 6 a.m. until 9 a.m. show before Sunday Cafe would start. He said, if you haven't got anything fucking good to say, play another fucking song. And of course I was like, well, what do you mean? He said, there's no point talking for the sake of fucking talking. Chas was very brutally honest, but in his own way, he was actually telling me to concentrate and think about stuff before I'd say it.
You had to get budget. If you didn't get budget, someone would lose their job. It was that simple. So we always made sure we got budget.
The best advice Chas ever gave me was one evening when I rang him up in the early days of the radio station, and I thought I'd give him some encouragement and compliment him on the music that he was playing at the time, and I think it was The Bread. And he said, yes, I knew it would appeal to boring old farts like you. And I think that was probably quite good advice.
I've been racking my brains trying to think about all the advice that Chas has given me over the years. And I keep coming back to him saying to me once, just be yourself. Just be yourself. Don't try and be cleverer than you are. Don't try and be funnier than you are, because that never really works. Just be yourself and you'll be fine. I've always tried to remember that. And if all else fails, then just play some rock and roll.
So the best advice that Chas ever gave me was to pull my head in. How was it given? Grant and I were standing in front of his desk in his office with our tails between our legs collectively on a Monday morning. On the Sunday, Grant and I had been to McNeil's Cottage Brewery, and we had availed ourselves of a number of classic blacks. As we thought it would be amusing to ring Chas, who we knew was at home, and leave several messages on his answering machine. That as the afternoon and the classic blacks rolled on, were progressively unsavoury, shall we say. Unfortunately, he did not get the messages Steph did, and was highly offended, as she should have been. And so the following day, Chas gave us advice which was, equivalent to pull your head in, with certain expletives added.
When I think of the best advice that Chas gave me, it was more of a luxury really than advice. He always used to give me full artistic license. So for 8 years, he'd plant a seed, and we used to come up with some groovy shit. So here's one of them. Oh, and so many more. One of the best ones was designing lightning bolts and space all over his brand new Land Rover. So that was pretty exciting as well. Cheers.
A lot of memories of Chas, really. I've got a favourite situation, and that would be pretty much every day during my time at Q92. At some stage we'd end up at the studio for one of Craig's meetings, and we would sit around Craig's dining table and talk a lot of shit, really. Some of it was about radio, which was interesting. The other stuff was reasonably interesting as well. Oh, but actually, my favourite memory, I guess, of Chas was something that he showed me one day, and it was that matchbook. I don't know if some of you guys might have seen this. You know, like some people would have business cards and stuff like that, but not for Chas Drader. Oh no. He had a matchbook, which had his, you flipped it out, had his photograph on it and his contact details, and I just love thinking that back in those days when he had those, which I guess was the early 70s, he went, "Hi, I'm Chas Drader. Let me light your fire."
Oh, favourite memory of Chas? Just one? Ugh. Okay, I have lots. However, probably just the simple things with Chas. Doing a radio show with him was amazing. Nothing like it. No better co-host. Going on our drives through Paradise Valley on one of my many visits to Chas when I'd come back from Canada, and just simply hanging out with him, being with him, hanging out on the farm, watching Stephanie do all the work while he sat around like this.
So my fondest memory of Chas Drader, and there were many of them, were always of him laughing. He had a great sense of the ridiculous, a great sense of humour, a bit of a sick sense of humour at times, which was awesome. But the one incident that stands out in my mind was the first Christmas that I was at Q92 FM, and Chas invited us all down to Glenorchy to go out on the boat fishing, and took us all over the far side near Kenlock for a barbecue picnic. And we were out taking turns fishing in the boat, and I was out with Mel Wise and Chas, and we were trolling around. We caught some salmon, and I'd told Chas the story about biting a head off a fish when I was on a fishing boat in Queensland. Anyway, Chas said, "I'd love to see what happened with Alison Beaumont if you bit the head off a fish in front of her." So we're coming in to the bank, and Alison's there, and Chas goes, "I bet you won't." So I picked up this bloody salmon, put it in my mouth, and ripped the head off it. While Alison was looking at me, and of course Alison promptly was ill, and Chas laughed so hard, snot came out his nose. And of course Alison thought it wasn't funny, but it really was very funny.
Memory of Chas. Well, Chas was a blast to work with. It was just hilarious. And I don't know if it's my favourite memory, but one enduring memory is I'm sitting there reading the news, and it was in those times of the terrible wars in Croatia, and I was trying to get my lispy mouth voice around these incredible names from Croatia, and I just was doing a really bad job. And he just took a lighter and lit my news story, my piece of paper, which I was reading out live on the air, and it just went up in flames. Well, the whole thing just dissolved into hysterical laughter, really. There wasn't much I could do at that point. So that's kind of what it was like working with him.
Lots of favourite memories of Chas, but I think one that particularly sticks in my mind was when we ran the very first Iron Kids triathlon out at Lake Hayes. And Chas turned up, and he just saw these hundreds of kids and parents and Q92 banners everywhere, and he was just beaming. And I think he just felt that, everything he'd hoped for the radio station had happened. And yeah, I remember that like it was yesterday.
My favourite memory of Chas Drader was the day of my job interview, which was in 1999, and not long after Paul and Charlotte's wedding. Chas was a guest at the wedding, and I was a bridesmaid, so we kind of got to know each other a little bit better then. I read some of the telegrams, and I also had some crazy banter going on with Craig Dillon. I can remember Chas said to me, you'd be good on radio. I didn't think anything of it at the time, until I got the phone call to say, would I actually be interested in doing a show with Craig Dillon from 4 till 6 called The Slide Home. So he said, would you come down for a bit of an interview? So I came down from Christchurch. I was so excited. Yeah, I was so excited, and I was so nervous. We met at Avanti's, and within minutes, I knew it would be okay. He had a way of making you feel completely at ease. Yeah, he was great at interviewing. He knew all the questions to ask. Yeah, it wasn't, we drank a lot of wine, we smoked a lot of cigarettes, and we shared a lot of stories. And I came away probably knowing more about him than he probably knew about me. That's maybe why I got the job, because maybe I was also good at asking the tough questions. What I learned about Chas that day, and what I will always remember, is that he was passionate about the people. He was passionate about community, and he was really passionate about music. And that's what made Chas Drader a legend. So after our big long lunch, we both kind of staggered out the exit at Vivanti's into Cow Lane and walked in opposite directions, and I realised that I still didn't realise, I didn't know if I had the job yet. So I can remember calling out, "Hey Chas!" So, have I got the job? Long story short, I went on to work for Chas Drader doing the slide home with Craig Dillon from 4 till 6. I sold advertising, and I also had a show called Mountains of Pleasure. Thanks, Chas, for everything you taught me. You are a legend.
Favourite memories, really, 1999 was a huge year for us because there were two large events that happened in the area. August 1999, we had President Clinton come and visit Queenstown, and the breakfast crew, we certainly had the SS, the Secret Service, on the run with our antics. And at the end of it, Chas, he had this old typewriter, and I used to call it the clacker, and it was either brought out when he was praising you or when you were going to get fired. Of course, I got both those. The clacker came out and away he went, the old Imperial typewriter with his Bakelite keys. And he just said short and sweet, great job, guys. That was Ferg and I. Great job, guys. And that meant a hell of a lot to us. So that was August 1999. November 99, of course, we had the biggest floods ever in Queenstown, and we broadcast off a houseboat, which is still around today in Colburn Heights in the Queenstown Bay. Once again, out came the clacker, and we got a lot of praise for that as well. And I've still got those letters to this day that Chas wrote. So, man, a few words, but the words that he did say and type meant a hell of a lot. That's the kind of guy he was. Interesting story about the clacker, though. Another guy called Andy Sholem and myself started a show called E-Noise on a Friday night. This was an extreme heavy metal punk kind of show, 10 till midnight. The things that we were doing on there you could never do now. And as a result of one night there, in the wake of, just trying to think what it was now, but anyway, I ended up playing this song called Cop Killer by Body Count, and of course all the red phone went all over the weekend throughout management, and then the next morning, the Monday morning when we got to work, absolutely crapping myself, I saw the CD sitting on Chas's desk, so I knew that I was in the shit. Out came the clacker, the old typewriter, and Chas actually typed out my resignation and I had to sign it. So I was gone on the Monday morning, buggered off. Back in those days, I was also copywriting, and we had a large share thanks to our wonderfully talented sales reps. So we had to write a lot of ads. So after I got the boot, shot down to McNeil's and had a couple of Classic Blacks, and they were one of our great sponsors, and so was the Classic Black Ale, which was a staple diet for Andy Sholem and I on this particular show. Hence why we played up so much. And I got a phone call on this old cell phone I had, and it was Chas on the other end, and he said, you better bloody come back because we got some ads to write. So I was back on the team and then stayed there till 2004. So great memories of Chas.
I got to have birthday lunches with Chas every year. Every year I think that I knew him. I had lunch with him on his birthday. So I feel very privileged, very lucky for those memories.
Probably one of my favourite memories of my time with Chas, and there's many of them, is totally not radio related. At one stage we decided to get away from it all. There was Brownie had met Fiona and they were in a new relationship. There was Steph and Chas in a relationship. I was single at the time, but we all decided that we needed a break, so we went up to Glenorchy, further on somewhere near Diamond Lake, and we went camping. Needless to say, we didn't see much of Brownie and Fiona. They spent most of their time in their tent, enough said. And that just left Chas, me and Steph to talk into the wee small hours of the night, and it was just a lovely time, spending time with them and me and nature, nothing else. We'd left all that behind in town.
Definitely my most favourite memory with Chas was about... maybe it was like 7 odd years ago. My husband and I went and had an afternoon with Chas and Glenorchy, and we sat around the table and we drank huge amounts of wine and we smoked rollies and had a whale of a time, just lots of tall stories, and yeah, it was just really nice for me to show David, my husband, what it's like to have a round table with Chas. And we got really drunk. I do remember that. And I think my mum came to pick us up afterwards, and we had to drive back to Queenstown, all like slightly festive and a little bit. But yeah, that was a really special memory, and I'm so glad we got to do it.
One thing I remember about Chas is he once said that the only thing he wanted in life was to be sitting on his boat on Lake Wakatipu, fishing and listening to his own radio station. I think he very nearly achieved that when he passed so peacefully at home in his favourite place in the world.
Chas was a true broadcasting pro, and his driving mantra for Q92 was for it to be first in every sector of the operation, and none more so than in news. If we were not first with a story, there was hell to pay, and though it didn't happen often, I do recall the reaction if Q92 didn't take the lead. Chas had passion for the industry and a big commitment to Q92, and this, combined with his unwavering support and loyalty for his staff, are the memorable standout qualities for me.
Favourite memory of Chas was, well, when I started working at the radio station, I wasn't really being paid, and Chas would give me odd jobs to do. On this occasion, I had the job of taking the banking down to the bank. This was before the days of electronic banking. This is when you had the deposit slips and the cash, and I had to take it round to the bank. So I took it round to the bank to deposit it. In the interim, the wind got up and I managed to lose the banking down the drain. This is outside the B&Z Bank in Reeve Street in Queenstown. I managed to get the banking out, but I went back to the station and Chas said to me, "What the fuck took you so long?" And I said, well, I'd actually lost the banking down the drain. And next thing, this finger comes out and he says, "You dumb cunt."
When asked what's my favourite memory of Chas, you just can't beat it. It's the twinkle in his eye. And that could occur with fondness for all sorts of subjects. He was particularly fond of his radio team. Yeah, he's pretty proud of them. He liked tequila too. Got the same twinkle.
I think one of my best memories of Chas was just his way with people. He just had a way with connecting with people. You know, he was very straight up. He had that lovely tone to his voice, you know, and he loved to party. I mean, one particular party with Q92, we were on this boat on the lake, and it was very. There was a lot going on. It was a lot of drinking, and back then I was fully into that, and it was one hell of a party. It really was so much fun. I remember the lot of us just kind of, literally supporting each other as we all kind of crawled up the mall to the next bar after we got back in from the boat. It really was a great time. It was fun being young.
Chas, thank you for taking a chance on me all those years ago and for inviting me into the Q92 family. Working with you and the team was some of the best and most memorable days of my life. I loved the fun, hilarity and high emotion of it all. It was the real deal, and I'm honoured to have been a part of it all.
It was a massive influence on my life, both professionally and personally. I was coming into a new career as a journalist. I was just learning that craft really, and he gave me an amazing opportunity and was an incredible mentor. So I learned so much from him. And then of course I learned about radio, and it was incredible to work with him, and it really set me off on a whole new career path that took me from journalism through to public relations, through to governance, all sorts of things. So I really thank him for being at the start of that journey. Secondly, well, he gave me my partner. Chas Drader is of course Chas's son, and I met Sean through Chas, and for that I have to thank him for his son and for my son.
So how was my life impacted by knowing Chas? I think in many ways Chas gave me the chance that unearthed a creative side to myself that I had I'd put in a sock drawer and forgotten about. for probably a decade. And in bringing me on board in a sales capacity at Q92 FM and giving me my head on air, allowing Grant and I to create the e-noise program, giving me an opportunity to feature on breakfast, and with a number of advertising campaigns with Alison and different other things, the creative side of me really got rebirthed again. And I can never thank him enough for that, because that creative side of me has never left me. It led me then into progressive careers in facilitation. I think I've been heading down a certain path up to that point, and Chas really opened my eyes to the possibility that I could do anything I really put my head to, and so I owe you a great debt, big fella, for that. It was remarkable, so thank you, Chas.
How's my life been impacted? Well, what I do now, it's very similar to a lot of things that I was doing on the radio. The radio taught you absolute precision, not just the creative side of it, timing out, not having any dead air, being totally disciplined in what you do. And of course, what I'm doing now, that's impacted on me all this time. All those things that we used to do on radio. And I think there were two people that could really time out well. And I learnt the trick from Chas, and then Craig Dillon, and then I got that trick down to a fine art, because we weren't automated back then. We became automated sort of about halfway through my radio career, when we were the first station in New Zealand to incorporate the RCS automated system. So everything I do, even to this day, I still think of those days and the precision that was involved and the discipline, although it might not have seemed too much, how that's impacted on everything we do.
How was my life impacted by Chas? Well, I mean, mostly my life was impacted by Chas because he taught me how to stand up for myself. Also, key factor, if it wasn't for Chas stealing me from the other radio station and taking me into his, then I would never have met my husband, who I interviewed at Q92 FM on Valentine's Day. So that's pretty big.
Well, he got me into radio. That was a pretty big impact moment, because I never for a moment dreamed I would have got into radio on any level. And through Q92 obviously came the studio, and through my time at the studio I met my partner, my British partner, and with support from Chas and others, I plucked up the courage to move to the UK and try at radio over there. And man, I had very little experience really at that time, but there I went. And I just want to show you something. This is an international radio production award that I won a few years back, and on the front of it, it's got the name of the award, it's got my name and a few other details, but I think the one thing that's probably lacking here, or the one thing that should be on here, is Chas Drader's name, because without him, that simply would not have happened.
How was my life impacted by Chas Drader? Well, firstly, he was a very good friend of mine, and the friendship between him, Brownie, I, and then later on Steph and Fiona, that was a special time that I'll never forget. He taught me that you could dream big and do it on a shoestring budget, and as long as you had ways and means of putting your dreams into action, didn't matter what your budget was, you would make it happen. And Chas was like that with the radio station. I later on went on with my own business, Happy Snapper, and did that on a shoestring budget, and made a great success of that too. So dream big, small budget.
I've got so much to thank him for. My life has totally been impacted by Chas. He gave me a start on radio when I was just 16 years old. He let me loose to be able to record songs to play through the night show. He taught me so much. He taught me about 60s music, 70s music, stuff that I'd never heard of. He just gave me the biggest platform and the best training. And as a result, I went on to have a really good career in radio for over 14 years. Q92 was by far my favourite station. We played the best music, and it was just, I feel very blessed to have been part of that and to have met the people that I met who are here today as well. And yeah, massive impact. Big love.
Question 4. Well, if it wasn't for Chas and the radio station, I think I'd be doing something completely different, not entirely sure what. Working with Chas and the crew, he really got radio, and it was such a joy to be around such a successful station. As we all know, radio isn't just one person, it's a team of people, and Chas was a great leader in driving the team to succeed.
How was my life impacted by Chas Drader? One of the most fun times we had together was building the space scooter for Ferg and Grant, the morning men, and he told me his brief, and we came up with this. So, how Chazzy's impacted my life? Who gets to build a space scooter, man? So many laughs, so many good times, and what a wild imagination. Truly good.
How was my life impacted by Chas? Well, he hired me when I'd pretty much had enough of being in commercial radio, and he hired me, and we got to actually have a lot of input into the kind of music that we chose. I learned a lot about music from Chas and from the rest of the Q92 crew. And I think he showed me like what radio could be, not what it was. Because what it was very formatic and very kind of McDonald's radio out there in most of the world. But Chas's style was it was a lot more progressive, and it was and yet it kind of was it was like an ode to the past as well, because it was about picking music and putting music on and just showing a lot more personality. You know, he was a personality. He wanted personalities on the radio, and there was no one that was on Q92 that wasn't a personality. Really inspiring. Best radio days of my life under Chas.
Enduring's not a word that I would use to describe a lot of Chas's qualities, but I definitely loved him dearly. He was a fantastic boss, mentor, father-in-law, had a fantastic relationship with Chas, but he was challenging. You know, everything I do in my work, he'd challenge it everywhere. Maybe that's endearing. Maybe that's why I loved him, because he was such a challenge. It was great. Really, really loved working with Chas, and he was a fabulous family member as well.
His tenderness. He really cared about people. And I remember when MediaWorks were taking over Q92, you know, it was clear that some people were going to lose their jobs. And on the day when the axes fell, soon after the axes fell, I was with Chas, and he wasn't in a good way. He was deeply upset. There were tears. I think because he wasn't in the station building at that time, some people thought he'd just sort of cut and run, which is far from the truth. I think he just didn't want people to see him that upset, because he was very, very upset. So yeah, his tenderness. He cared for people. He tried to look after people as much as he could. That instance, man, that was just business.
Chas was brutally, brutally honest. It actually made you feel a bit shit, to be quite honest. but he really cared about people that he knew. He was like an interesting person to talk to. He could tell a story so that anybody could understand. And when sort of Chas spoke, in most circumstances, he kept quiet because he was an interesting person to talk to. We shared lots and lots of conversations over lots and lots of different things. But he had a very, very good heart, and he was just a joy to know.
Oh crap, what was Chas's most endearing qualities and why? In 30 seconds or less? Okay. Chas's laugh. I loved hearing Chas laugh. I also loved how Chas would always walk on the right hand side of me. Apparently he told me it's to do with keeping my dress clean when the horses and buggies rode past, or some such thing. Anyhow, it was very sweet. I think the way he stepped up at my wedding, and he actually did the father-daughter dance with me because my dad had gone home, and it was really special, and I'm really glad that I have that memory. His work ethic, his intelligence, his knowledge and expertise in broadcasting was basically second to none, and we've lost a legend.
Okay, so Chas's most endearing quality, probably his sense of humour. He had an amazing sense of humour, and he actually loved words, and he had a very special Chas way with words. So I think his sense of humour and the way he used words would be, to me, his most endearing quality.
Now I live in California in Silicon Valley, and I work for Apple. You would have loved and appreciated all of the innovation here. My new boss, of course, is Tim Cook, but you, Chas, you are and will forever be my favourite boss. Rest easy, old fella. Love you, and you will always be remembered.
Most endearing qualities of Chas was, well, he was like a dad to us at Q92 FM, and that went on and on and on. I mean, I saw Chas, last time I saw Chas in a group setting was at Charlotte's production, Very Happy Times there, which was a wonderful, wonderful time. And then I talked to Chas, Glenorchy race time. Ferg and I would go up there and we would talk to him and go on air at Glenorchy Country prior to the event. And then I talked to him on his birthday. And then I talked to him a couple of weeks back. He built this wonderful model plane, and he wanted me to fly it for him. I don't have the skills to do that. It was a wonderful model, and unfortunately Chas never saw it fly. And he said once he saw it fly, he was going to give it to me or sell it to me, but he never saw it fly, sadly. He took a massive interest in everything I did, whether it be through my flying or whatever. University was an interesting one. I did a master's degree in 2012, finished it then anyway. And it was an MSc, human factors, so science-based, and I was having a few problems writing essays. 1,000 words is not much when you're given a subject to write, so you can't waffle on like a lot of art students do. You've got to be very, very, very succinct in what you say. So I said this to Chas, and he said, well, just write the thing the way you talk. You know what? I did that, and the essays were great, and I passed. I got out of there with distinction. So that's sort of advice. He just said, write it how you talk. Simple stuff that meant a lot. He was very supportive of me when I was crook. We were down in Dunedin at the same time. Chas had buggered his leg. And he wasn't afraid to give you a good boot in the backside and also give you a lot of praise.
Chas was an incredibly supportive man. He always had time for you. He'd always make time. One time I went to his office back in 2003 and said, Chas, I feel like I really need to give up smoking. So he supported me and gave up smoking as well.
One of the most endearing things or strong things that I remember and will always remember and take with me with Chas is his belief, his vivacity and his love for his staff, his love for this area, and just being. He was so strong. He was almost that epiphany of keep it simple but do it bloody well. And it was just that quiet strength that you knew he always had your back. he was always there. It's really powerful and beautiful and just absolutely wonderful. And I think that is, it's just incredible how much a person can become part of who I am and what I've taken with me through what I'm doing. He will continue to stay with me, and I know he's going to continue to stay with so many people just because of that. I feel very privileged to have known Chas. I feel very privileged to know Sean, Alexa, Stephanie, your whole family. You've all accepted us into your family, and you've allowed us to love your dad, your husband, your father-in-law like our own. And he had a big wingspan, Chas Drader, and he took a lot of us under it. I truly love the man, and as much as he's no longer with us, he is forever with us. We're going to be down there when this is playing, so I am really looking forward to celebrating your life today when this is going to play. Love you, Chas Drader, and thank you. And you will live on in my heart forever, and you will continue to live on in so many. We'll keep you alive. Love you.
Chas's most endearing qualities, there are many of them. I mean, he was like the Keith Richards of radio, you know. He had a swagger about him. There was something about him. He's just a warm bloke, you know, a firm bloke too, but just not a perfect man. None of us are, you know, but just a great guy, and a great personality, a great voice, inspiring to listen to, so that when you got on the radio, you know, you had someone that actually inspired you, that was in the building. And you know, his contribution, you know, he's one of those characters that 20 odd years later, I still remember as clear as it was yesterday. Now, you don't meet that many people like that in life.
Chas's most endearing qualities, absolutely the laugh, the voice. He's hilarious, like, I mean, I think back as I absolutely cannot drink rum anymore or gin. Not happening. Just an all-time good guy, a sweetheart, an amazing mentor, a great friend. But I think, yeah, the laugh. The laugh and definitely the voice. Rest in peace, old boy. Love you.
Chas's most endearing qualities. Well, I thought he had a lot, and I could rattle them all off like a laundry list, but of all of them, the things that I will remember most were his humanity, his sense of friendship, his sense of fun, his sense of humour, those human endearing qualities. You know, he was an ethical man. But he cared about the people that he knew. He had genuine affection for those people who worked with him. He loved them, and they loved him back. And he was a really fair, very forgiving man, and he was very funny. He was wise. He could get you to look at things differently, and he could ask you questions that sometimes pulled you up in your tracks and made you go, "Oh, okay, hadn't thought of that." He was all of those things, and he was a great friend, and he was a great mentor at a time when I was probably too arrogant to know I was being mentored. Top bloke. Miss you, mate.
So, Chas, you know, Ferg and I often talk about what it'd be like when Chas was gone. How would we deal with it? Yeah, it just seemed like he'd go on forever. But, you know, he got his radio show out, lay down for a nap, and that was it. And it's not a bad way to go. But Chas, you know, you're not gone really, are you? You'll always be here in everything that I do. And I know our Q92 FM family, we think of you every moment of every day. So to all of you that are still out there from Q92, you'll be hurting like I am too. But just keep your chin up. Go hard. Be disciplined. Because that's what Chas would want. Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to just say a few words. I hope I didn't waffle too much. At 5.5 minutes to 1, I'm out of here.
Anyway, Chas, old friend, farewell for now. You brought so many of us together. It's going to be hard to be apart.
He was a legend in this area. Amazing even around the radio station in Glenorchy of all places, and probably had the most amazing voice. He had a face for radio, but an even better voice, an incredible voice for radio, and will always be remembered. Cheers to everyone.